Hello, everybody. This is Reanimated Podcast, episode 172. My name is Stuart. Joining me is the indelible H.A. Conrad. Hello.
Hello, hello.
There she is, everybody. For realsies, coming out of Brooklyn. I'm going to have a niece in Brooklyn next week. In 2 weeks. Yeah, shortly.
Wow, that's new.
Yep.
That went fast.
Doesn't it? It's crazy the way that works.
Whoa. Wait. So are you coming out to see the niece? Are we going to do a live podcast in Brooklyn?
Would that I could, but that's a lot of airfares.
I will always hope.
I know. Holly's going to come out and spend some quality time while I hold down the fort here.
The fort.
That's currently the plan.
Sweet. Well, maybe we will snag Holly.
Yeah. Get her to do it. She'll be like, I never watch any zombie movies.
I know. It would be really funny.
I don't know how that's going to work out for you, H.A. However,
all right, well,
we are delayed in recording this podcast because of a squad of cable people who showed up at your apartment last week. But last week we were breaking the somewhat fresh news that Andrew Lincoln was leaving The Walking Dead. This week it's pretty old and stale.
No longer fresh.
Not even close to fresh. This has some moldy spots on it, this piece of news. But Andrew Lincoln, Rick Grimes is leaving The Walking Dead next season. And there's been a fair amount of speculation about this, and not least of which was the news that accompanied this, that Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl Grimes. They were getting married.
Nice.
Who plays Daryl Dixon will be taking over as the male lead, insofar as Andrew Lincoln has been that in this ensemble cast. And so you and I had talked before we were cut off last week about how Daryl wouldn't necessarily make like a great leader for The Walking Dead, because he is kind of a laconic character. He's strong, but doesn't talk much and doesn't seem to come up with the same sort of diabolical plans that Rick seems to. But then, honestly, I would say that Rick hasn't been really doing much in the last couple seasons to make himself seem super awesome.
True. And I also think that Andrew Lincoln he's talked about it. He's hinted at this a few times, and this wasn't even recently. This is like a couple of years ago. So we kind of anticipate that this would ultimately come, and you predicted it when we were talking about this a few weeks ago, that this character has to die at some point
in order for the show to ever be good again. Yeah.
Now, I do think that if there are certain ways that they could build on Daryl's character, possibly that would make sense, but again, I'm a little skeptical. We'll see what happens with it, but and maybe with the fact that we have Maggie's character staying in the mix for a bit anyway, maybe they're going to sort of balance it out between the two of them, because that makes a little bit more sense to me. But anyway, time will tell. Yep. and we shall see.
I think we're looking at a really a ticking clock here on Norman Reedus and Melissa McBride. As far as the other two folks who were from the pilot episode, they're the last two remaining. Even Morales isn't going to come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Do you think that they're going to end the show soon? Or do you think that they've got a couple more seasons in them?
I think they're going to ride this dead horse into the sunset.
This undead horse.
Yes. There's I can't imagine AMC letting this thing go quietly into the night.
Well, I guess time will tell. But in other news, and this was a while ago as well, but it was just kind of strange. There was in London, there was apparently a near collision with a cyclist and a car. And the cyclist pulled out this massive knife that they were terming a zombie knife. And I thought that was an unusual thing to say, but
we've talked about these knives, and British media is obsessed with them and calling them zombie knives. Yeah. But it's just like a big Bowie knife with jaggy edges on it.
Yeah, but it is pretty terrifying that somebody's carrying this around for personal use. So, we'll see. But they're obsessed with calling these things zombie knives. Take a look at the photo. It is a little bit.
When there's video, or there was video.
I know.
And you can see how ineffective this zombie knife was at car windows, which is
didn't do so well.
Kind of.
Anyway.
I mean, good for the guy in the car. He didn't have to get stabbed. and then didn't he eventually get out of his car and run away at the end of the
Yes,
video?
he did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. As was probably the sane reaction to this kind of an interaction.
Yeah. I mean, nothing to laugh at. Somebody was threatening a guy with, severe bodily harm for what should have been just like wow, that was close. Thanks for not hitting me with your car.
Yeah. Road rage is real, Stuart.
Yeah, you're right.
But in other news, our friends at Forbes have come up, and they actually did another article about the Andrew Lincoln news, and it was the same writer, Eric Kane, but he's continuing his zombie corner trend at Forbes, and I feel like all of the plants of the Forbes little like zombie enthusiasts have suddenly become clear with this article, and this is an article about how Netflix should have an original zombie show to replace The Walking Dead, and Eric Kane has magnanimously offered to be the sort of person to give them these ideas and jump in on this show
to be their lead writer.
Right.
But this article also represents a sea change because he is just as hard on Fear the Walking Dead as he is on Walking Dead. And you and I haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss the new direction that Fear the Walking Dead has gone in this season.
Yeah.
But have you been watching it?
I have been saving it, so I have not.
Oh, dude, you need to get there. There's a lot to actually, and I feel like we need to start reviewing it shortly, maybe after this movie review we're doing today, because. Sure. Yeah, it's new showrunners, and it's very apparent. And it's not just new showrunners, and it's also like now more firmly under the hand of Scott Gimple. And I would posit that influence can be the influence of The Walking Dead Prime can now be felt more on the Fear the Walking Dead, for better or for worse. That's where it is. And I think Eric Kane has decided that it's all a lost cause now. And the only way to move forward is for him to write the zombie show we all deserve and put it on. We put it on Netflix.
Okay.
It's so strange to see someone like pitching Netflix in an article on Forbes. I don't know.
I know, right? But anyway, I was kind of enjoying it. So, go Eric Kane. In other news, and I have not actually listened to this yet, but apparently there is a podcast out called Bubble, and it is on Maximum Fun, so I'm putting the link in the show notes. Again, I can't speak to this yet because I have not actually listened to it, though it does sound kind of interesting. But basically, it is a podcast that is comedy, and it's basically a band of monster killers, so I would say probably in the Buffy-esque kind of vein, but a podcast, and they are in this community that's under a bubble to keep all the bad things out, like zombies and all sorts of sci-fi creatures, but apparently, of course, they have to leak in. It has a lot of names that you recognize, like John Hodgman, Alison Becker from Parks and Rec, Keith Powell from 30 Rock, and all sorts of stuff, and they have like special appearances and that kind of thing. So
to be frank, I don't recognize those names except for John Hodgman.
Really,
I recognize the names of those shows that they're on.
Judy Greer's also appearing. Yeah. Martin Starr.
Nope.
You know Martin Starr? No.
Do I? I mean, maybe if I saw him.
Freaks and Geeks.
No, can't say I do.
Also, Silicon Valley. In any case, it looks enough for me to test it out, so maybe we should think about talking about it later at some point after Fear the Walking Dead. But basically, it's a Portlandish type town. This is set in Fairhaven, and so they basically have to like find love in a nightmarish version of the gig economy. Hence, I guess supposedly the comedy aspect of it. So. I'm gonna definitely take a look at this.
I did like that they're using like a zombie hunter version of Uber, yes, which is I guess the gig economy part of it, where like people are gonna sign up to hunt evil or creatures, whether they be zombies or whatever finned baddies. Signing up through their phone on an app, which is kind of funny.
Right, and this actually launches on June 12th, so it's
Oh,
not
good.
yet out.
Well, then
as far as I
I'm
know.
gonna line it up and get it into the rotation along with.
Sorry, June 13th. But you can find it on pretty much any podcast, and anything you want to download it on, you should be able to get it.
Super.
So,
Final news item is another video trailer, and actually, there's two video trailers out there. There's one that I didn't put in here. The first one is the Days Gone. I think it's a PlayStation 4 exclusive, which we looked at when it was first announced. I feel like 2 years ago or something now. It's the one about the biker in the zombie apocalypse. You and I watched.
Yeah.
You remember that one? And so this is more, much more detailed trailer. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. It seems to be, it's a terrifying zombie world that he inhabits because it also has zombie animals. So
yeah, I wouldn't want to be a biker in this apocalypse. Let's just put
I wouldn't
that
want to
way.
be anybody in that apocalypse.
Anyway, it does not seem like the odds of survival are very high
No,
for anyone.
because he's got wolves and birds all attacking him. It's definitely
Yeah, everybody's nothing's safe. Nothing's
it's definitely bad. And then Overkill's The Walking Dead, which I've talked about a few times, has released, I think, their fourth and final character video. And I forget her name, but it's another lady. So it's two men and two women through all the trailers that they've released, and they're all really good. They're all really well produced. Again, of course, the caveat is none of this is gameplay. We don't really know what the game's going to be like, but they're putting a lot of effort into these little vignettes to promote this game and these characters who are going to be presumably player characters in the game. Have you seen all four of them or any of them?
Of the trailers?
Yeah, you saw the first one because I think we watched it together.
I saw the first one. I watched this one because you put it up, but I have not seen all four. So
Okay.
If you put it together into a nice little link package for me, I will do it.
So lazy.
I am totally lazy.
Okay, fair enough.
You know me.
I do. But there's the news. It's been talked about. We done talked about the news, and now on to Ravenous, the Quebecois film that Netflix helped push over the finish line.
Right.
And
not to be confused with a restaurant of the same name, apparently in France somewhere.
well, also there was another movie called Ravenous
Yes.
from the early 2000s that was awesome
Yep.
about cannibals. That's almost a zombie movie, except because there's a little bit of supernatural to it. But that was a really good film. I'm trying to remember who the
was
lead
good.
was, but it's not coming to
I
me.
cannot remember either.
Anyway,
But anyway,
however,
this is the Quebec version.
yes, it's. What are the details about this film? What do we know about it?
So we've talked about this a lot. We've had some in the lead up to this being released on Netflix. This was directed by Robin Aubert, and he had done a few interviews with this. And one of the big things is that he got basically money to be able to do some of this project. It's all filmed in Quebec. It is subtitled. It was unusual to have basically a Canadian horror film like this, and it got great reviews in the Toronto International Film Festival, and it actually I think it won an award there. It was best film in that particular film festival, and so we had been hearing about this for a while before we actually got to enjoy it. I think in this world, the thing that has already happened. There's no real lead up to us finding out how it happened, other than a very quick. We kind of get just a very quick initial peek at what's going on, and this is the world before, and it quickly goes into what the world is now, which is a bit after the outbreak. So just the cold open is at a racetrack.
It's an odd place to have a cold open. Didn't you feel like there was a?
Yes.
It's so much.
I felt like there was a connection. There was there had to be some weird connection to the racetrack. I don't know. I thought it was strange. I thought this was strange only because it just seemed incongruous with where everything else happened.
And with every zombie movie ever, it's I think a lot of the scenes and topics that this movie dealt with were Aubert's personal pride or personal
Yes.
passions. I think he's probably into racing. We know he's into hunting because he's talked about it a lot in
Definitely.
interviews, and in this movie kind of revolves around hunting a fair amount. Or there's definitely dabbling, but I thought it was kind of interesting because it's such a loud sport with some pageantry and It's like corn dog. I mean, in a way, maybe it's no more weird than like setting a zombie apocalypse at the fair, but to me, it just felt like a very interesting and unique setting to stage the opening of the apocalypse.
Well, it did only because we don't really. This is it. Like this is they show this, and then it immediately goes into a rural setting without showing this particular setting again.
Yeah.
And ultimately it does get tied back in. But this initial thing was sort of this, and then it immediately goes into like the main plot and storyline and group of characters. But in this particular instance, a race car driver is making out. Some crazy woman starts approaching them and attacks the honey he's making out with, and that's how we kind of see what's happening. And we get a first look at sort of what the mythology behind this is, or the idea of the walker / zombies, which is they look pretty much normal at this point. Just kind of looks like a person that's a little bit unbalanced, and then suddenly they're ripping your throat out.
These are not zombies that look like zombies ever, as far as I can tell.
Human.
With the exception that they find some extras who are like some pretty backwoods looking folks, is about as crazy as they get.
They do a little bit with the makeup. They definitely do, but it's not obvious enough that you could tell from a distance that somebody was a zombie or not.
No.
They look a little like they got the dark circles. They definitely did a little bit of the discolored veins under the skin and things like that, but nothing like we've seen in, say, Walking Dead.
Then there is a transmission element to this too, where if you get bit, you turn, but you very rarely see zombies with bites on them, I would say.
Correct.
I mean, once in a while, there's one scene specifically where the guy looks really bit as he attacks Baldy and the girl. It's like I couldn't remember their names in the truck at the hunting lodge. That guy had obviously been bit and turned over sometime. But yeah, so they don't typically have bite marks or the kind of Walking Dead effects, which are very gross. These are not gross zombies, but they're
terrifying though.
This movie, shooting wise, editing wise, does a great job of like suspenseful scares, like jump scares. It works pretty hard on those, and I think they pay off.
It works hard on those, and overall, I have to say I enjoyed most of this. And we can talk about the parts that I wasn't so psyched about as we get into it. But in terms of the transitions and the editing, I thought that they did a very good job in terms of the suspenseful moments and things like that. After the race car track, it immediately goes into what the world is, and it doesn't exactly show you how long it's been, although we hear a little bit about what the timeline has been. So it's been at least a couple months or so, correct?
It's hard to say. I would say it's hard.
Yeah.
What makes it seem like it's been at least months is how, God, what are their names? Vizina and Boonin? Is that his name?
Bonin. I think it's.
They are super comfortable with the situation in a way, even though they're not like perfect zombie hunters. They are basically zombie hunters. That seems to be what they do.
And it's normal enough that they're like making jokes. They're just kind of while they're burning bodies,
and they seem to just be doing like a roving patrol almost. It's not really clear if that's their role or not, but this is like one of several vignettes we go to, really quick flash vignettes right after the racetrack scene. There's the old man running away from some screaming zombies.
There's Celine, who is, basically attracting zombies. She's like businesswoman in a suit and
pearls,
whatever. Yeah. In her pearls, and like turns on the music to take out an adult zombie, but not a kid zombie.
Yeah.
And
then there's Vizina and Bonin telling jokes in the back by the pickup truck as they burn some bodies and then get in the car and drive off. And then we kind of stick with them after that, and we're driving through the woods. These woods get a lot of play in this movie to the extent that I think it was a little detrimental because they all look the same. And they're clearly like planted. They're it's a forest that's planted in very definable rows.
Yep.
So they could have used something. I mean, and that sort of scenery, that landscape, it's like if you just did the whole thing in cornfields, and maybe, you know, that's the feeling they were going for, but
Right.
it's a little bit too much of the same kind of landscape, I would say.
In terms of the types of zombies that these are, and we see a little bit more, we see with how Celine is attracting one and takes that down with like a machete. But Bonin and Vizina seem to be almost patrolling the area. We don't know exactly where this is when they're patrolling it, but we see pretty quickly that this is a different type of zombie mythology that they're going for. So, you know, they talk about this woman and her kids, and they stop in this area. And the thing that I find a little bit, this is one of my like criticisms of this film, is that I feel like the narrative and the mythology is kind of shifting, and it is not consistent. And the things that the characters are doing are not consistent with what you would expect them to do if they had been living in this world. And the reason why I say this is that Vizina and Bonin are very careful. They talk about it. I mean, they're comfortable enough that they're making jokes and things like that. But it's sort of like, if you're going to, and so it makes me wonder if some of this narrative was lost on the editing room floor or something like that. But they jump into the action pretty quickly in that they see this woman, they talk about her, they talk about her kids, and you see her with a kid in the woods, and Vizina, for whatever reason, just starts to like go in after her without, like, it's pretty dark in there. There could be other zombies in there, infected in there. And Bonin says, don't go, yet Vizina continues to go. And I found that to be a little strange, just because I just think your only sort of advantage is that you're in the open on the road to be able to see them coming. I don't know that you would be going into the woods like he did.
It doesn't seem like a smart idea.
Right,
I thought
and
you were
then-
going to say that your beef with this movie was the fact that these zombies can move in complete silence through any kind of terrain.
Oh, they can move in complete silence, except when the director chooses to somehow have them snap a twig, which sort of shows them coming, or has them wail, or has the noises that people are make suddenly become like the thing that the zombies hear. Like, you can't have it both ways. Either they're super sharp in hearing all the time, or they're making noise all the time, or they're silent all the time. But it seems like it's inconsistent throughout the film. And it's suddenly like, oh, they're totally silent until now. And I find that, I think there could have been just a tiny bit amount of tweaking that would have made that a lot more effective and consistent throughout the film. I will say that in this particular sequence that we see Bonin and Vizina go in after this zombie and her child. So it seems this is freaking terrifying, because suddenly you see a weird little kid up in a tree. They are
he's stealing pages
shows,
from The Shining in this. It's like,
yeah,
okay,
totally.
we got people standing still at the end of a long corridor of forest. Like, this is straight up the Stephen King shot right here.
Totally a horror
and
shot.
then you look away, and then you look back, and now there's only one person standing there, and you're like, okay, well, why aren't you sprinting back to the fucking truck at this point?
Exactly. And also, you know, this is the other piece of this mythology that's a little bit different, is that the zombies can actually plot and plan. They're strategic, or can be strategic in how they hunt. It actually reminded me a little bit of Jurassic Park.
Clever girl.
With the velociraptors.
Yeah.
With the velociraptors, where they're like, you see one, but no, suddenly you're surrounded by them, you know, so because you keep your eye on the, you know, so that was definitely an effective and scary trick that he used. But I felt like you have to be consistent with what your zombie mythology is and what they're doing. And I guess you could make the argument that they're evolving, and maybe that's part of what's going on here, but I don't think that if that was the case, that they effectively showed that.
Well, there's a few different weird behaviors that these zombies have, too, also with their construction projects that they seem to love to do. But so, yeah, Vizina gets bit in the forest. We've also had another vignette that of the kid who's buried his family and has a rifle. Mm-hmm. And they spend a fair amount of time on this kid. But then he has like
Tai Cool or Remy, which is his real name.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the T Cool nicknames, but then so they spent a fair amount of time developing this kid's backstory through flashbacks. He's the only one who apparently gets flashbacks, which is actually good, because otherwise it would have taken We would have been in flashbacks forever for all these characters. But it's strange that they give him the flashbacks. He has very few lines, if maybe just one, when he says his name. And honestly, he gets killed off pretty quickly. It's not quickly. It's probably in the third act of the film, or at least late in the second.
Right.
But like the kid, I was like, he's gonna be our Carl, and maybe in a way he was.
I thought he was too, and I liked him, and I just didn't know why they kind of went that way. He also fully understood that Real, who's the older gentleman that we saw in one of the earlier vignettes, had been bitten. Everybody knew he'd been bitten, so it's sort of like, I just don't understand. They're all obsessed with later on we meet Tanya, who has also been bitten, she claims, by a dog, and they're all talking about that, but they're not talking about Real's like big ass bite out of his thigh. It was just a little strange to me that
it was unspoken, but I think everybody was on the same page about that. But then the way it unfolds is silly. But Tanya, the whole Tanya thing, dog bite woman, as I called her, because I didn't know her name until the end. She does, the film does a great job of treading this line between, is she infected, is she not, do we buy her story, do we not, even till the very end. I feel like you're not sure, because they do sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle things. I mean, they've described, that's actually the first interaction that Bonin and she have when she's tied up on his bed. He's like, this is how it's going to happen. And of course she has her earplugs in at the time, but he doesn't realize that. He's like, first you're going to get a little blotchy. You're going to throw up black stuff. And then one day you're going to wake up and realize you're chewing on your kid's intestines in the kitchen or something like that. Right. It was, those about the extent of it. And the film does a great job of showing us she's throwing up in one scene, but we don't see what it looks like. If it's black or not. She does get a little bit blotchy in some scenes, but also they're like fighting constantly. And how can you tell when it's, legit blotches versus disease blotches? And so I thought that this movie did a great job of not really revealing to us or to the characters and playing on that distrust basically throughout the entire story, and not in a way that it got like tired.
Right. I was going to make a joke about the fact that given that the zombies in this film tend to take human objects and do weird things with them and be attached to them, her attachment to her accordion I thought was incredibly bizarre.
Inexplicable.
Inexplicable and strange and dangerous, given that how much noise that those things make even when you move them just a little bit. So I thought that was very strange. But I also thought that this film, in terms of the things that I was really I thought was excellent, is that they definitely have comedy placed throughout it to balance out the dark theme of the film. And I felt like they did it fairly well for the most part, specifically through the vehicle of Bonin, who's played by Marc-Andre Grandin. He's constantly making jokes all the time to lighten up the mood, and he gets called out on it sometimes, especially by the Tanya character, because she's basically like, can't you ever be serious, and all this other stuff. And he's basically like, well, it's the end of the world, so this is the only thing I can really do to stay sane. But I thought that they used that, and there was some pretty excellent writing that was just super dark but also really funny. But a little off-putting, specifically with the character, and I cannot recall his name right now. The one he had come in from, he's a little bit off, and he keeps surprising them.
Demers.
Yes, Demers. He just doesn't understand that it's a zombie apocalypse, so he'll constantly jump out at them, and so that's some of the jump scares that are so effective, but also oh my gosh, this is ridiculous, this guy is going to get himself killed. I did think that sometimes the pacing in this film was a little bit, as you said, because of where they filmed it, a lot of it looked the same. And so I think that the editing was great, but I thought that some of the pacing of this film could have been sped up a little bit or tweaked a little bit so that it was in different places. I think there were probably budget constraints, perhaps, and they probably had permission to film in certain places, but it does end up looking all the same. So they're just kind of they could honestly be walking around the same 1 or 2 acres, which is they probably were.
They go through a lot
So,
of similar woods, and they go to a lot of similar shacks.
yes. And it's kind of like, oh wait, are they back at this shack and that shack? Ultimately, the sort of the thing that gets them on the move is that the infected. We find out little bits and pieces throughout the storyline what's happening. Bonin and Tanya meet up, and unfortunately, all the people that were with Bonin at the campsite are dead or have turned. And he and Tanya kind of make a go of it, despite the fact that she's been bitten. And that adds a bit of tension because we just don't know whether she is or is not been bitten by has been bitten by an infected or not. We have Teresa and what is the name of the other woman?
No idea. The two old ladies, the two grandmas.
Two old ladies who were great and also very obsessed with pickles. Like they are very Pauline is the other person.
Their story is weird too. Like, so they take in businesswoman who, by the way, they make her strip down, and you're like, holy crap, this chick does CrossFit or something, because she's just like,
yeah, she looks amazing.
She's all muscles. Yep. You're like, that does not jive with pantsuits. But
nope.
In her case, okay, she's just like clutching her machete, and they find out a little bit more about her, mostly through the empty car seat in the back of her Mercedes.
Car.
So their situation seems weird though. Like everywhere else we've been through Bonin's perspective is like is death and destruction. Like people are all gone except for the undead. But then Teresa and Pauline are able to just hang out on their farm with like nothing. I mean, they're cautious, but they're still out of their house. Like I feel like in this apocalypse, you have to basically just disappear. You can't even be in your house. And eventually it does turn out like that there used to be more zombies around them, and then they disappeared. And now somehow they're in the path of some sort of migration, is what Bonin tells them. Although that's not really, right. I don't know how he knows that.
Right, and it also seems, I mean, he's basically conjecturing that they're looking for food, and they've run out, so they're coming back. And then one of I think it's Celine makes this comment that the cities are empty and they'd be safer staying in the cities, which is like an odd thing to say, and how they're getting this knowledge is totally unclear. And I think it sounds like there's been a couple of government broadcasts, which we don't know about, and so maybe that's where they're getting some of it. And again, this is my part where it's like my issue where it would have been a little bit easier to add in something like some radio broadcast, something to show where they're getting the information from, because it feels a little disjointed that you don't have that. And it doesn't necessarily add to the stress level to know that what's happening with that, because it would give them absolute motivation for moving, whereas I feel like just going by Bonin's word is a little strange. There's also the thing which I actually, and this is like, I wasn't fully aware that one of these older women was supposed to be Bonin's mother.
Or Vizina's mother? Wait.
Or maybe Vizina's mother.
They're Vizina's parents.
Okay, Vizina's parents. But it wasn't clear to me all the stuff that was happening. I don't know. It was just like a couple of the storytelling themes, and again, it may be the language
I think
slash
some of it was that,
issue.
yeah. Because at the hunting cabin, the dude tells her like, "Hey, have you told Teresa yet about her son?" But that's okay. Right after they tell him like Vizina's dead. So right. I mean, I think the information's there, but it's maybe packaged in a bit of a weird way. And right. Calling him little pup on the radio, you're like, oh, what's going on? And then there's a bunch of frame photos of I guess Vizina. A boy who was Vizina. Well, Vizina's not like a young man. He's like a kid. He's like 40. I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, so we have the group of travelers banded together, but I definitely was confused about why these women were just kind of hanging out in this house. Mm-hmm. As you said, it seems like the best thing would be to find some kind of place to hole up. That you're able to defend. This house is all windows. They're all on the ground level. Like there's no way to keep this particular place secure easily, just because of the many access points. And so I was kind of bothered by that. That you have to be consistent in sort of how it's going, and then even when how the story's progressing, and then even when like. They know these people have been surviving in this world for a really long time, and there's a few of the scenes that they when they go out to kind of deal with the zombies, and this is what I was talking about in the inconsistencies in the zombie mythology. So we've got like a scene with Bonine and Tanya where she's like at one point peeing in a field, an open field, and then suddenly hears a snap of a twig, and suddenly a zombie's right there. And he saves her, and that's like, it's a good jump scare. It's a good bit of editing where she like drops down into the field and whatever. But it's not clear to me like how the zombie knew she was there because she wasn't making any noise, and how she really knew it was there because it was silent until suddenly it wasn't. And then when we're back at the house with the group of people, you know, they suddenly, in the middle of like kind of a conversation, hear a random snap of a twig out in the woods.
Oh, it's a mousetrap.
Okay. Well, either way, it's not going to make that much audible noise that they're going to hear it in the middle of this whole group conversation.
Oh, no, this was later, right? This was when
Okay.
Teresa's out on the porch doing watch. Everybody else is asleep inside.
Yeah,
in
but
theory.
it's also, but okay, you hear it, but do you go out into the night
Yeah.
to look for this thing? No, you kind of board up in your house. So there's things like that that I was just like, I think if it had been, and again, I think that they did a great job with this film. I think there was wonderful editing, but these were the little pieces that like nagged at me.
Yeah, this
While
is
I was
this is
watching the
also a
film.
zombie apocalypse where the zombies leave animals alone, which is definitely my preference over the one where everything turns into a zombie. So there's scenes or little quick shots of like a zombie standing in a field full of sheep, but just standing there. You've got horses running through the forest. You've got a box of kittens. Like animals are clearly doing fine, and that's kind of a trend or a theme through the movie. And I think that also plays to our director's fear of humans, which he has talked about in the interviews. It's not, he's, you know, as a hunter, he is more scared of the other hunters, as he's said, than he is of any kind of animal. And there are no predators that show up in this, right? There's no like bears or
Nope.
mountain lions. It's just all like domesticated animals that are running around, hopefully not like starving to death because they're in their pens and zombies aren't going to let them out. But yeah, so I thought that was an interesting theme of these vignettes that we see. And it does kind of raise the question like, hey, if you're going to put mouse traps out in the forest as your perimeter, what if a deer just walks through there? Because there should be lots
Right.
of deer right now. But yeah.
That's what I mean. Like that kind of like sort of thought process, like if you've been living in this world for a while, that's not necessarily going to be helpful. So
Well,
I don't
it's
like
just bananas
kind
that
of
these zombies can move so quietly through the forest. Like,
Yeah.
they're yeah, so they should. I mean, I kind of get the storytelling element. Like, yeah, let's use mousetraps to find because they're so quiet. But like, why are they quiet? Like,
Yes.
we don't see them tiptoeing very much. They're just
Why
kind
are
of
they-
wandering around,
and then but then when they're quiet until like suddenly they're not,
and then they
as
start
I said.
screaming, and yeah. And
Yeah.
this is one of my favorite parts about the scene that comes after this. After everybody runs into the forest, and you're like, oh my gosh, two women probably in their 70s, or you know, a little girl, and the rest of the group. How is this gonna? How is this pursuit gonna work? Why didn't they have a better escape plan than this? But then they get in the forest, and Pantsuit Lady goes absolutely bananas to the point where I'm writing in my notes like, wait, is she a zombie now? Because she's making all the same
Yes.
sounds as them, and I'm sure that this was
See?
on purpose.
Of course it was, because then we see how things progress later. But I thought the same exact thing, because I was like, oh wait, did she somehow turn?
But she's just running back, and it's like almost, it's pretty comical if it wasn't for the fact that everybody's like, you know, almost dead. Like Tanya gets attacked and is almost killed. The little girl saves her, and then Pantsuit comes and saves her. And then you just see Pantsuit running and screaming through the forest, and you see Bonin running back and forth with his shotgun. It's kind of comical. And one other thing about the cinematography in this scene and in several other scenes, I really enjoy the way they frame shots in this movie.
Yes.
Where they keep the frame in one place and let the action run back and forth across the screen.
No, I think it's great,
Yeah.
and I thought that the editing was excellent. I definitely think that the suspenseful way in which they handled these things was just like in how they told the story in this way was great. So kudos to the cinematography of this film.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but that night scene goes a way I did not expect it to. Like, suddenly it's the next morning, and there's just like, I don't know, 50 bodies lying around in pieces because Pantsuit has clearly chopped them all up, and it's all
Yeah.
it's clearly her. Maybe Bonin killed a
Mm-hmm.
few with his shotgun. Where are all his shotgun rounds? That's never really addressed. But okay, I'll accept that he has a never-ending shotgun, just like Herschel did at the farm in season 2 of Walking Dead. It's just I don't know. Like I'm happy that the scene went that way because otherwise it could have just been like, all right, now it's just Bonin and Tanya and the little girl, or
Mm-hmm.
it could have just certainly killed off the group right then and there, but they chose not to.
Right. I also thought in the way that they brought the group together with the old man, Real and Remy, or Tikol, that that was like kind of interesting because they kind of see them in the woods.
Tell
Um,
basically with non-verbally tell them to jog on.
Yep. And that was kind of interesting. And then they come across one of these. This is the other piece of the film that we were alluding to earlier. But the zombies basically take everyday objects and pile them up together. It seems like specific objects. So we've seen piles of chairs or piles of appliances or later on we see some things like a bunch of toys with kids, and so you would imagine depending on the size of whatever this thing is that is indicative of how many zombies are infected or in the area, or at least I assumed that's what they were trying to go for. And they just kind of stand around these stacks and look at them,
And make noises like a
which
bunch of cicadas.
yeah, which is like okay, but basically they, after the sort of run-in with Real and Remy in the forest, when they end up in a field where they see one of these things, the little girl Zoe, like they kind of come across it pretty quickly, and there's this great editing where the little girl Zoe is suddenly noticed by one of the zombies, and then the zombie turns away, and when she turns back, Real is in front of the little girl. I thought that was really great. How they handled
Well,
that.
clearly
And
he
he's
moves.
kind of
He moves like a zombie already, and that he
well,
can do that
right,
so silently and quickly.
right, and that well, maybe that's like the precursor.
That's just the
Obviously,
trope
but
for this film. Is you see,
yep,
look at something for a second. You see one way, you turn back, you turn away, or you turn away and you turn back again, and something else is there now. And that's how Aubert, is his name Aubert,
yeah,
wants to
and
present the film.
but what I liked about this whole thing is that it's all nonverbal. So that when they run to Real and Remy in the forest, that's nonverbal. They have the whole thing where suddenly they decide to become allies in the field, absolutely without any dialogue, and so I kind of liked that little trick. But you know, and then as this band comes together, they got bigger, and then immediately they just start to be picked off.
Well, this is where they make some dumb decisions. Where the first time they met with Old Man and the kid, it was the reason why they were lots of shots of his leg, and people were looking at his leg and pointing guns at him. They all knew he was an imminent threat. And then he saves the girl and them by association, like because they're all together. And then he does some introductions as they get back in the forest, and then they go back to walking, and he is left to walk at the very back of the formation. Nobody's watching him.
Yeah, like put him in the front, man, so you can keep an eye on him.
And while I like the scene where they realize that he's no longer behind them, because it's another one of those the
Yeah.
frame is frozen and people are walking first to the left and then to the right, and not everybody goes back. It's not like a, hey guys, the old man has probably turned.
Yeah,
Maybe we
I
should
know,
all deal with this. It's just instead it's just a kid in pantsuit who go back to deal with them,
Yeah.
not telling anybody. And the rest of the group goes ahead to shack number 5, which and bad things happen at both places. Like
Yep.
this is not like bad filmmaking bad. This is like, oh, you guys don't go through that door bad. So
Yeah.
that's just horror movie right there. But
Tropiness, yeah.
it's still it's always painful.
And you find that you're yelling at the screen when it happens.
Yeah. So our group gets whittled down pretty, and this is where the kid buys it, and you're like, wait, he barely had I think his only lines are after when he's dying, and Pantsuit takes care of him. She's not exactly like getting really developed either, because she's just like a rage machine, and she does talk about like how she was the perfect woman. She talks about her old life a little bit, but she doesn't really get much more development than that. And then I don't think she needs to, because her transformation or whatever she's going through is pretty stark. Like, you don't need a lot of explanation for that.
Right, and she takes care of Tikal or Remy. It's they whittle down the group pretty well and pretty interestingly. And the final battle scene I thought was very good.
There's lots of scenes,
But
isn't it?
yep,
Yeah.
the final battle, like where you realize that they're gonna just totally like they it's a little bit of a lost cause. Um, and
Well, their cause is
you
already
know,
left because they were running low on food. They went to that bunker to try and like just
yep,
hole up, and the bunker is empty. Like there's nothing
yep,
there. And then so there's no dialogue here, but they move on, right? Like they
yep,
just walk out into the fog, and there's a zombie with a baby.
yep. That was creepy. It was a doll though, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was a doll, but it was still like it
Um,
triggered pantsuit lady to go into one of her rages. And then the fog parts, and there's like a
yes.
whole scrimmage line of zombies there who are just gonna come. It's yeah, I mean, it was cool the way it unfolded. It's like the swift decapitation, or like the whole group gets split up and killed off to the point where you don't really know what happens to Bonin. You don't really know what happens to Tanya, but they both go out like you live, I will hold them off, or that kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
the accordion gets used for the first time, and we're left with Zoe, who's clearly our little heroine.
Mm-hmm. But again, unclear whether I mean there's some weird little like tricks of the camera, like so we have they show various weird things with the zombies, so it's not clear whether this is now real or not real. Like so, there's a little bit of that going on. But she ultimately comes out, and people have sacrificed themselves for her, Tanya especially. And then Bonin, just make sure he basically she sees him before he turns, and he tells her to run. Um,
That scene
and
is worth mentioning too, because he's about to shoot himself in the head,
yep,
and
yep.
then he's
And he
like,
gives her the gun.
You have to leave, right? I don't know if he gives it to her, or if she takes it from him, but then we see him later. Oh wait, did you see the post-credit scene?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're like, yep.
All right, just making sure. So yeah, well, like we get to see him and Tanya again after the credits, but Zoe chooses not to. She finds the accordion, picks that up, and drops the shotgun, and then goes
Mm-hmm.
out to Route 113. Did you like the way that was wrapped up when they found the note from number 79?
I thought that was a little ridiculous, quite honestly. And that's how they tied in the track driver with all of this. So they had found a note in one of the cabins basically warning them off of going to the town. And number 79, it's like, who signs their note that way? He like has been looking for survivors. He apparently just drives back and forth on this route every day, and his car is so loud that he would attract based
It's,
upon what we have seen, he would attract every single walker
yeah,
for
it's the
miles. Like
worst
his car,
possible zombie apocalypse car. You
right?
see it when even when it's slowing down to stop on the road, it goes all wobbly. Like these are cars that are not meant to stop. These are cars that
Right.
only go. I don't
But
know.
in this sense, like, and he's still wearing his outfit, and I don't know, it was a little weird, and surreal, but maybe it was supposed to be. And puts Zoe in the jump seat, and that's that. And I guess it's a semi hopeful ending, but it's still like, gosh, like who knows what's going to happen with them at this point. But overall, I did enjoy this film. I liked it despite some of these little things that we are nitpicking
Yeah,
out.
you don't
But
look at it too closely. This is still
no,
super enjoyable.
it was enjoyable, well done. I thought the cast was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I definitely thought that they did a great job at sort of balancing out the dark comedy with the more somber scenes and things like that. And I think they got the balance right. And so my small criticisms of this are only because I felt like if they had tightened some of these things up, it would have been an outstanding film. So, but I definitely recommend it for fans of the genre. I think it was fun, and it's we've had a good run of some good films the last few times.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Oh, well, I mean, there's plenty of bad stuff out there, but we're obviously in a feast period
right.
in terms of what's coming out, and now we just have to hope that Patient Zero or one of these other ones that we've been waiting for, or what's the Ellen Page one that we've been talking about a lot?
The Cure.
Yeah, I think Quebec should get into the business of making zombie movies because this one was good, and they should use this as a proof of concept.
The Cure, not The Cure, sorry. I definitely think they should do this as proof of concept, but I'll also point out that especially like in Canada, when you do projects and things like this, and I believe this is where we saw a couple of he indicated this in some of his interviews, but Aubert got some funding from, and obviously permission from the Canadian government in the form of grants and things like that. And I think that that's something that's pretty cool, that you could do these artistic projects and get permission to run around the wilds of Quebec, I guess, to have your vision come true. So
Yeah.
So continue, Quebec. Come on, let's go for some more Canadian zombie productions.
Critically, this movie was well received. It's got 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, only 56 on the audience score. But as always, what do they know? And it's on Netflix, and y'all should see it.
Agreed. So what are we going to talk about next time, Stuart?
Well, I think, unless you object, I think we should dig into Fear the Walking Dead, the most recent season.
Yep, I'm cool with that.
So that's what we'll attack when we next get together. And you get ready, HA, because it is different. I mean, not like crazy different, but it's definitely, I think you'll feel the departure of Dave Erickson, the previous showrunner, and whoever's running it now. I forget. It was like a team. I think you can feel it immediately.
All right, I will start my binge watchiness. Are we doing 2 episodes at a time, or do you want to like section?
Okay, start with 2.
Cool. All right. Well, if you have watched the Ravenous or Les Affamés, please feel free to leave us a note. Let's hear what you think. You can tweet at us, which is reanimatedpcast, email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or leave a note on our website, which is reanimatedpodcast.com. Someday I'll get this all right.
Good
Just
Lord.
it'll flow off my tongue. I know I'm the worst. Until next time, ciao.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.